Hi, my name is Morgan Blanton, and I work for Cleveland County Schools. I am the secondary MTSS coordinator here, so I primarily work with our intermediate and middle schools, as well as freshman academies right now at our high schools. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today is how we are digging deeper with data. Specifically for literacy in the secondary world here in Cleveland County. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our literacy assessments that we've chosen to use, the what we're using and the why we chose to do it that way, who is doing the assessing and when those assessments take place. The next thing I'll talk to you about is how we are analyzing the group data based on the results of those assessments and how we're using the gradual release model to teach school level teams how to do that. And the last thing we'll talk about is our intervention matrix that we're using to delineate out how we are using a standard treatment protocol for supplemental or intensive supports for schools, but also a little bit about how schools have the ability to customize their matrix that we give them from the district level. This is an overview of our decision-making process, and this will address the literacy assessments part of that top-down web you just saw. It gives you a big overview of how we go from universal screenings all the way down to targeted assessments. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about these, but I just want to point out a couple things. You'll notice here that we have two tracks as part of our universal screenings. We have students who have passed the EOG and students who have not passed the EOG. These students may need supplemental instruction if they're not passing the EOG. And so we look at how they did on the Mays assessment to make that determination as far as do they need supplemental instruction or is core enough? If they do, is it in the area of comprehension or do we need to dig deeper? If they didn't meet benchmark on Mays, we will look at their fluency, and then we have some cut scores, whereas if the student scored 10th percentile or less, we may look at their core phonics survey to see what their decoding skills are like. And then from that, we look to see the results and try to match these students as best we can to the appropriate intervention. So that's the quick version of what we do from universal screenings all the way down to our targeted assessments when we start to match students to their intervention. So this is a little bit more about the what and the why. This data analysis chart takes you through our thought process about universal screening. One thing that we do in secondary that's a little bit different from what our elementary folks do is we only universally screen one time a year, and we do that in May to prepare for the upcoming year. And the way we universally screen for literacy is we look at their EOG scores and we give the AIMSweb Mays probe to all of our students. And we create a spreadsheet from that, and it's color-coded, and so it helps us to look and see what students might need. Is it core instruction? Is it supplemental? We're not real sure. So we want to create a list of students that we may need to dig deeper into with some more assessments. So what this table shows you is how we look at that data. So our spreadsheet will tell us if a student made a 4 or 5 on the EOG, then that student doesn't need intervention in literacy. So we're going to monitor that student. So we're not going to just give them core and forget about them. We are still going to monitor them through grades and things like that, as well as our yearly universal screening. But most likely those students are going to need core instruction. Also, if students made a 3 on the EOG, we are indicating that they need core instruction, but they may need differentiated core as far as a little more skill instruction during core instruction. And so we have decided to draw the line in the sand for interventions after or lower than a level 3 on the EOGs, but still indicating to teachers that a differentiated core is what Tier 1 is. And so these students may need a little more skill instruction during core. The next thing you'll see on here, the top 2 levels are students who made 1s and 2s. And so this is where we start digging a little deeper. Our spreadsheet is a pretty cut and dry spreadsheet. So if they made a 1 or 2, that trumps everything else on our spreadsheet. And so it automatically says, look at their oral reading fluency. And this is what AimsWeb calls their oral reading fluency probe, an RCBM. So it automatically says that. But when we looked at our spreadsheet, we still had more questions. And so what we were thinking is, if they passed the maze or met benchmark on the maze, does that mean we need to look at their fluency? And so what we decided here in Cleveland County is that if on the spreadsheet their maze score was green, which means they met benchmark, then we don't think we need to go back and look at their fluency, that they have demonstrated that they can read on grade level text with the maze. And so they need more comprehension support. They're still not passing the EOG. There could be a number of factors there. So we need to problem solve that a little bit more. But as far as literacy, if it is a literacy issue, then providing that at the comprehension level is what we think is best for these students. And then you have your students who made a 1 or a 2 on the EOG. Our spreadsheet says to look at their fluency. And so we look at the maze first. And they're red or yellow, which means they are below or well below the benchmark on maze. And so what we say is that means we need to dig a little deeper and look at their fluency and see if fluency is an issue. Some of these students' fluency is not going to be an issue. And so we would bump them back up into a comprehension supports group. But if it is fluency, then that gives us a lot of information about how we can provide additional supports in fluency for those students. So that's an overview of how we use our universal screenings to not say this group needs supplemental, this group needs core, but this group needs core, this group needs to be looked at closer. And so now from our universal screenings, we have this targeted group of students. And so let me talk to you a little bit about how that happens. This is the who. What we did over the course of the first years, we did a data study, but part of that study was to build school level teams. So the targeted assessments that I'm going to tell you about in just a minute are done by what we lovingly call the SWAT team. We call this group of educators at the school level the school level assessment team. And so in the fall last year, we started off with only 2 members on a team per school. The rest of the assessment team during the fall benchmark period were the other curriculum coordinators at the other schools. We came together and we assessed together with the school psych at that school for them. And we talked about how to do that, how to analyze the data, what it might mean for professional development. But at this point, we are building capacity in a school level leader for the assessment team, which is typically the secondary curriculum coordinator as well as the school psych. And then you'll notice here we gradually added 1 more person. So now, for example, this school has 3 school level people, and then we took off some district people. So gradually we are changing over from a district assessment team to a school level team at each of these schools. I put their titles here just so you could get an understanding of how different schools created their teams, the personnel that they used. It's different at every school, and it's different because of the staff that they have. So by the time we got to the spring benchmark period, this school in particular had 4 people from their school that were on their assessment team. This one right here had 5 on their assessment team. And that group of educators is the one that's responsible for actually doing the assessment at beginning, middle, and end of the year with that targeted group of students. And so the purpose of this gradual release model is just to build capacity and sustainability. It's not really feasible for the district to go and assess all of these students at all of these schools. So building capacity and ownership at the school level is imperative. And so this is one way that we did that. So let me talk to you a little bit about the decision making that we did during the targeted assessments. So at this point, we have a group of students who we know they may or may not have passed the maze. And so we want to look at, do we give them the maze and monitor their comprehension, or do we need to look at their fluency? And so at this point, we've got 2 groups in our targeted group. We've got a maze only group that 3 times a year we're going to keep track of their comprehension because they are in a comprehension group and will be progress monitored with comprehension. They didn't pass the EOG. They didn't pass they did pass the maze, but something's going on, so we felt like they needed to have some additional comprehension supports. And then you've got this other group who did not pass the maze. And so we want to look to see if fluency is the issue. And that's our next level of defense to figure that part out. And so what we do is we give individual assessments in fluency using the Aimsweb probes. And then while we are assessing, once we have given those 3 oral reading fluency probes, at the end of it, when we get the score, we have this decision-making guide that helps us decide, do I keep this student and look at their decoding skills using the Core Phonics survey, or do I send them back to class because I have enough data to make that decision about their fluency or comprehension? And what we have used as our cut score is the 10th percentile, and it's different for each of these grades. And so each assessor decides right then, do I keep them and dig deeper, or do I send them back? And so that's how we use this decision-making protocol. Once we have our data, then we want this group of educators to learn how to analyze and interpret this data based on groups of students. And so this one right here is the oral reading fluency results sheet that we would get from Aimsweb. And so what we did in a gradual release way is I did all of the analysis for all of the schools. I took their reports and I looked at groups of students and said, if this group of students, this well below average on their fluency group, if you've got students in this group, let's look at their Core Phonics results, see if it's a decoding issue. If so, we need to work on decoding with those students. If it's not a decoding issue, then let's bump them back up into the fluency group because there's definitely a fluency issue, and if it's not being caused by decoding, then we can work on the fluency skills within that. We also have a group that were below average on fluency. So for this group, we didn't look at their phonics because it wasn't 10th percentile or below. And so this group of students, we're going to start out by providing fluency instruction for them. And then if they met benchmark for oral reading fluency, then we are going to say that their oral reading fluency is fine. And so we need to focus on comprehension with these students. And all of our teachers have been trained or in the process of being trained to use the Key Comprehension Routine from Keys to Literacy as one of their standard treatment protocols that they could use. Now, some of our schools do have other programs that they have and can put in place for Tier 2 level supports, or they can use this. And we'll talk about that in a minute when we look at our customization options in our matrix. And so here's our matrix. It does indicate what is our standard treatment protocol. And as I mentioned before, this indicates how we ICE it. I love that acronym. The instruction we provided for this skill at this level of support, the curriculum, and then the environment, as well as how would we analyze the data. And so for decoding, we are using the Making Sense of Decoding and Spelling curriculum. It is free. It is put out there by the National Literacy Institute, and it's actually meant for adults. But when we did our data study last year, we realized that most of our students at this level, if they do struggle with decoding based on the Core Phonics survey, it is in that last part where they are having to decode multisyllabic words. This curriculum targets just that. It focuses solely on multisyllabic words. And so that is our standard treatment protocol that we at the district level provided PD for teachers to do this curriculum. And so we have delineated out all of the ways that you would provide instruction, what the environment might look like, and how you would evaluate student progress, as well as looking ahead at intensive, what could we tweak to make this a little more intensive for students who may need more support. For oral reading fluency, our standard treatment protocol is the Fluency Development Lesson by Rosinski and Paddock. It's an oldie but goodie, but it can be applied to many different texts. And so here in the secondary world, what we have provided teachers as their standard treatment protocol is how to do this lesson, and really focusing on the performance piece of that, the motivational piece, using high interest texts, songs, poetry, a lot of things that adolescents may be able to get into a little bit more. We are at the supplemental level focusing on untimed repeated readings, whereas when you move into the intensive level, pulling in some of those timed repeated readings either through programs or a protocol at the intensive level. And then the last thing that we have, and I think that it will come up right here, is for comprehension. And this is the one where schools have more resources available to use as their standard treatment protocol. And so this level has actually seen the most customization at their schools. And so comprehension, what we have taught people at the district level and provided at the district level is how to do the key comprehension routines. And we know that that can be used for tiers 1 or 2 supports. And so that has been provided to teachers already, but some schools have access to other resources that they want to put in here as part of their standard treatment protocol for comprehension. And so when I meet with the problem-solving teams at each of the schools, that's what we work on, is talking about what resources are you using, what evidence-based programs do you already have that you think would be a nice fit for each of these areas. And so that is what we're using mostly to have a tool that is very clear and concise, and an easy way to communicate to teachers and to other schools. What are we doing here at Cleveland County Schools, but also from school to school within our district. I hope this helps, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, so feel free to give me a call. Thanks.